App Planning for Success. Brought to you by Software Accelerator Playbook. On Instagram at S.A.Playbook. Today on the podcast, we're talking about how to get to your best idea. Now, it may feel like at the beginning when you've kind of, you've got your idea, it kind of, hits you in the middle of the night, or it's something, you have that moment of like, oh, like, yes, I want to build that thing. But what I want you to imagine that as is a mold of a block of clay that you throw down and start molding. Okay, so the idea is that you're not ending up with, the final idea, but it's a fantastic starting place. And as you have that kind of that first big hunk of clay, thrown down on the table, at that point, then you're able to start working with it. So you need that first idea, but also don't consider that, the whole thing's finished, that you're throwing down on the table a finished mug or a finished bowl. That's not the way it works. It's, I've got this really great idea, and then as you throw it down and as you start molding it, you start finding different things. You start finding ways to improve it. You start finding ways to make it even better. And so, ultimately, it's difficult to just go from, 1 to 100 in the blink of an eye, meaning, just getting all the way to the end result and, deciding right away that you know exactly what you need. That by going through a process and refining it, by throwing it down first, but then asking questions about it, right? What's wrong with this? What's bad about this? What wastes time with this idea? Where, in terms of like a simple form, for instance, there may be duplicated fields that don't need to be there. There may be a way for you to basically, restructure the way that you're doing the form in order to take fields out of it, which is an optimization, because you want less fields. You want people to enter less information and have to do less in order to get the same result. It's not helpful if you have 10 forms to get all the way through when they could just fill out, 10 inputs in the form versus 3 inputs in the form. Less inputs is much better. So as you're moving forward and you're trying to refine an idea, keep in mind that you're throwing this thing down and then you're analyzing it. You're saying, how can I make this better? And breaking it down into pieces and parts to say, what else can I do here? And by going through that motion of analyzing what you've got, not just, getting it out, not just getting the vision out, which is very important, by the way. You need to throw the clay on the table. But once you throw the clay on the table, the questions you ask and how you analyze it will then lead you to the next best spot. And so if you're just, hasty with it, you throw the thing down on the table, you say, ship it off, I'm done, you're missing out on something really important. Now, this happens over and over again as you move through the software life cycle, as you're getting people to, actually use it, and then they're giving feedback to you, and they're saying, hey, I think this should be, molded a little bit differently, or I think this should be, this should be changed here. You're going to get those kinds of things as you move, or as you just use the software yourself, you'll say to yourself, I really like this, but, it'd be awesome here, we could add blah, 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 blah. So the molding doesn't necessarily stop. You're not going to necessarily get to a point where you just say, I'm done with this thing, it's completely finished, it cannot be optimized. There's always a way to make it better, there's always a way to make it more optimized. But in terms of before you get into development, how to refine that idea, how to find the best idea, it's not at first sight. It's not at first glance that you're going to find that best idea. Now, some things may come through this way. Some things may come through where, you throw it down, you say, hey, this is good enough, I'm good with it, it's good for now, not a huge deal, I can move forward, and that's fine too. But going through the process where you throw it down, you start analyzing and asking questions about why it's bad, what could be improved about it, how long it takes for people to get through it, where there might be, duplicated data, where there might be confusion about how something's going to work. Other ways that same thing, other use cases for how people might approach that. So in terms of like a scheduling feature or whatever else, if you come to it, looking at that and going, I'm really interested in, this, the first way that I came to this idea was because of this use case. I thought of this because I wanted to do this thing. But then you also want to consider, well, how else might people approach this? Does this need to be expandable in a way that I haven't considered yet? And so by going through user cases, by going through cases and just saying, okay, how is the person using this going to approach it? And start using example data. So as opposed to just thinking about the form and filling in the form, you now transport your mind into actually being the customer or being the client or being the app user and actually filling it in your mind. Start using your example data and filling in based on a certain scenario, right? Imagine that it's all finished. Imagine it's all done and you're approaching it as the user. You're approaching it, trying to get something done, and you quote unquote use it. And as you use it, you can then see where the holes are. You can then see where it's not expandable enough, or where there's too many clicks to do something, or where it's too convoluted or confusing. So as you go through that process, throwing the clay down, which means, getting your idea out of your head on paper, and then analyzing and asking questions, why is this bad? What can be better about it? How can this be refined? And then going through user cases, basically saying, okay, fine, I'm going to pretend to use this now. And as you, enter information in, writing down, okay, for this first form field, I'm going to enter in this information. I'm going to enter in a number. Okay, well, does the number need to be an integer? Does the number need to be a floating point number with decimals? Does the number need to be a date? Does the number, maybe is this field going to be, potentially a date and also potentially, just a number like 5? In that case, the design's wrong. In that case, something's confusing. Does something need to be split into pieces as opposed to having one input do many things? Does that need to be split out? Or do multiple different inputs need to be combined? And so by going through this exercise of basically becoming the user and walking through the form yourself, walking through the process yourself, pretending you're the user, you then start thinking of, oh, but what about in that case? Or, oh, but what about in that case? I need some extra thing here. So ultimately what you're doing is you're trying to kind of stretch this thing. You're trying to stretch it and kind of push it past its limits and see if it still works fine. See if it's still, that everything still comes through fine and you get to the end result fine. What happens typically is you'll go through it and then you'll realize, oh, I forgot about that one case, or, oh, do I want to consider this one case? And then it helps you then expand it out from there, make it better, and just make sure that you're being thorough as you then move forward to development. So then as you move into development, you've now thought of all these cases. You've now thought ahead and expanded your mind in terms of how this thing is going to be used. And from there, you're able to be in much better standing as you move forward and get the thing developed. You now were more thoughtful from the get. And that's the trick. Being more thoughtful from the get. Being more detailed from the get. By doing that, you end up giving yourself a huge advantage moving into development, where then you're not going to go back. Once you get something developed back and you start using it, if you find something then that needs to be refined, then you're going to have to go back through a whole nother development cycle. So it really pays to be clear before you move into development exactly what needs to be built so that you don't have to chase your tails. You don't have to run around in circles, pay twice for the same thing. Whereas if you would have just taken a little bit more time at the beginning and planned out better and asked yourself more questions better and asked yourself questions about, what's wrong with this? What's bad about this? How can this not be used? Who's going to be using this? Why are they going to be using this? In multiple different cases for those people, coming to this software to use it, putting it through its paces before you bring it into development is one of the biggest keys for making sure that you're building the right thing and you're not wasting money or time or hassle. Hope this was helpful. I'll see you tomorrow.